Nelson Jr., President of the University of Liberia, Dr. Romel Horton, President of the University College, President Reverend Dr. Yabono Gongwe, President of University, Dr. Benjamin Latte, President AMU Zion University, Dr. Alvin Atta, President AMU University. Students, my fellow university, friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Nelson, your commitment to the conference reinforced our resolve. The planning committee is particularly thankful to you. Our appreciation also goes to Honorable Leonard Rennie, Minister of Information and Cultural Affairs and Tourism. We expect Minister Rennie to award him shortly. Our thanks also go to our co-partner and host of this conference, Princeton Theological Seminary. My colleague, Dr. Aki Ketogami, will speak a little more about the prehistory of this conference and will also tell us about the way forward. For now, it's sufficient to say that our presence here this morning indicates a pledging partnership between Princeton Theological Seminary and the University of Liberia has endured. I recognize all participants here and online. Let me close my acknowledgement with one group, the dedicated members of our committee. I will read the names of the members of this committee who have to plan this conference. As I read the names and you are in this room, please stand. 1, Councilor Norris L. Square, co-chairman. Professor Wendy Kokoba-Gole. Vice President Vanessa Lokota. Vice President Isaac Garnett. Mr. Eric K. Jebo. Mr. Thomas Kaya. Ms. Jacoby Stockman. Mr. Raphael Reed. Reverend Mary Saloni Smith. Pastor Clement Booth. Reverend Sylvester Toe. And Reverend Alfred Walker. These are the men and women that helped to prepare this conference in conjunction with our co-partners from Princeton Theological Seminary. Minister Letter Rennie just walked in, Minister Rennie, we acknowledge your presence. We are here today to deliberate on the lives of people of African descent who, having been anticipated, relocated to Africa. Some return to familiar surroundings, families, and acquaintances. Our deliberations over the next 3 days will explore the lives of this diverse group of former enslaved people and of those indigenities they encounter. In this vein, the conference would now have come at a more propitious time for Liberia. Our conference today coincides with Liberia's year-long bicentennial commemoration of the arrival of free African Americans in present-day Liberia. On January 7, 1822, about 200 African Americans landed and huddled on a narrow landmass jutting from the Monrovia River. Daozo, the indigenous name of the island, would eventually become Providence Island to the African American settlers. 25 years later, they founded Africa Christ Republic. Different aspects of the afterlife of slavery will be considered here. You may recall that the transatlantic war came into being in the week of Christopher Columbus's October 12, 1492 voyage to what would become the Americas. The past October 12, this past October 12, some people celebrated Christopher Columbus Day, while others condemned the Italian explorer. Both critics and supporters of Columbus present compelling arguments for their respective stances. To Columbus's critics, his arrival spelled devastation for the Indians, as he mistakenly called the indigenous people he encountered. He and his fellow Europeans who came afterwards kidnapped and enslaved indigenous Americans. Over time, millions perished from unspeakable violence, forced labor, and diseases that Europeans have introduced, such as smallpox. When the indigenous people proved unsuitable for plantation labor, Europeans turned to Africa. Ultimately, an estimated 10.7 million Africans were enslaved in the Americas over 300 centuries. What they experienced was horrifying and inhumane. Thus, genocide against indigenous Americans and the enslavement of Africans are the bitter consequences of Columbus's voyage of 1492 that also experienced. But to his supporters, Columbus was a hero. He, contrary to existing maritime convention, dared to sail west to find an alternative route to peace where the fighting of European trade lay. This unparalleled achievement powerhouses, the United States, Canada, and Brazil, for example. The indigenous Americans who that they introduced the whole world on their return for population growth in Europe, Asia, Africa, and amongst others. Where would the Irish be without Irish potatoes? The Italians without tomatoes? West and East Africans without cassava and corn? What about Nigeria? Where would Nigeria be without gumbo? Where would Nigeria be without food? And what about GB? Where would Nigeria be without GB? And where would Nigeria be without fried fish and cassava gravy? Columbus, of course, will say, thanks to Columbus. This, Columbus supporters claim, is the legacy of this great explorer. The word he discovered saved millions from starvation and continues to reach people around the globe. But our purpose here today is to never condemn Columbus, nor to praise Columbus. Instead, we are here to reflect on the afterlives of the group of people that descended from the Columbian era. Our analysis are intended to clarify various topics in the transatlantic world. Those clarifications should add to a body of knowledge on this topic. The planning committee is exploring the possibility of publishing a book based on the papers presented at this conference. Accordingly, we ask our presenters to complete this prospect. Today, I extend to you hearty welcome to the Afterlives of Slavery Conference. Thank you, and may we have many fruitful discussions. Welcome to the conference.
Thank you, Professor Doctor and Chair of this conference. Very exciting what you just said. Let me also give a welcome to those who are listening to us live via various platforms. We have a Facebook page, which goes live. Thousands of students and others around Nigeria and elsewhere are watching this as well. So now we'd like to know as an outreach of Afterlives conference 2022. Say a lot of nice things. So in order to say again, UL and we have Princeton, so it's a pleasure to call Professor Adigoni, Chair, Afterlives Conference Planning Committee, Princeton University, USA. Please give her a big hand. Thank you very much.
So, good morning, Minister Rene, government officials, ambassadors, and members of the diplomatic corps and international organizations. Our host, Professor Julius Nelson, President of the University of Liberia, Vice Presidents and the administration of the University of Liberia, President and heads of other Liberian universities and institutions of higher learning, keynote speakers, conference participants, invited guests, and students from University of Liberia and other institutions in Liberia and beyond. Gentle ladies and gentlemen, I bring warm greetings from Professor Craig Barnes, President of Princeton Theological Seminary, elect, and will serve as PTS 8 President effective January 1, 2023. Dr. Walton comes to Princeton Theological Seminary from Wake Forest University and also previously from Harvard University. On behalf of the Afterlives of Slavery Conference Committee, comprising the University of Liberia, Princeton Theological Seminary, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, and the Howard University Divinity School. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the International Conference, Colonization, Christianity, and Commerce, the Afterlives of Slavery in the Transatlantic World. This is one of two conferences, with the second conference titled, The Trouble I Have Seen, the Religious Dimensions of Slavery and Its Afterlife, which will be held in Washington, D.C. in October 2023. Stay tuned. Permit me to briefly highlight some events over the last few years as Princeton Theological Seminary, which relate to the founding of Liberia 200 years ago, and which also have profoundly impacted our seminary. In the spring of 2016, the PTS president, in response to a combination of faculty research discoveries and Association of Black Students urgency, commissioned a committee of professors and administrators to engage in a deep examination of the school's historical connections to the enslavement of people of African descent, but also race relations in the 19th century. This committee studied the relationship of the seminary's founders to slavery, the economic base of our facilities constructed prior to the Civil War, and the participation of our early professors and board members in the American Colonization Society. The report revealed that contradictions and complexities of the claims and practices of the seminary's early faculty, students, and donors. The audit uncovered crucial memories that have been conveniently forgotten for over 120 years. The seminary's excavated history includes key themes that are relevant to this conference. Princeton Seminary faculty, board members, and alumni were deeply involved in the American Colonization Society, which advocated sending former slaves and enslaved people to Africa. Though many of its members opposed slavery in principle, they feared immediate emancipation could cause social upheaval. The ACS was founded in 1816 by, among others, Robert Finlay, a pastor and board member of the seminary. The first three professors of the seminary, Archibald Alexander, Samuel Miller, and Charles Hodge, all used slave labor at some point in their lives. The writings of Alexander and Hodge in support of the colonization movement point to the widely shared assumption of the society's leaders that blacks and whites could not live peacefully and productively in the same society of the US. It was a profound failure of theological imagination. None of those white Presbyterian ministers could imagine that God would be able to transform America to make it a society of interracial equals. But they could imagine God transforming the entire continent of Africa by making it Christian and democratic through the free slaves that they sent to Western Africa. They thought that the solution to America's problems with slavery and race that it devised would atone for the slave trade, gradually end slavery, remove the threat posed by post-Asian revolution blacks to white safety in America, Christianize Africa, and bring democratic republicanism to Africa. The proposed solution would they thought, thread the needle between the twin evils of the institution of slavery and the apocalypse of civil war. When Princeton's Reverend Finlay proposed a scheme for the colonization of Africa by free slaves, he received the enthusiastic blessing of the entire faculty and the board of trustees of the seminary, and the same from the College of New Jersey, now known as Princeton University. Presbyterian ministers from around the region and across the state of New Jersey also enthusiastically signed on to this scheme. Once the ACS was founded, many high-profile American political leaders and several largely white Protestant denominations gave strong support for the idea of colonization. In addition to raising money for the ACS, at least through the 1880s, people connected with Princeton Seminary established and supported the Ashmont Institute, later renamed Lincoln University, which is also known as Black Princeton, as a training ground for the doctors, lawyers, politicians, and clergy of Liberia. At some point, at the end of the 19th century, Princeton Seminary began to forget about the colonization scheme and about Liberia. By the middle of the 20th century, the seminary had conveniently forgotten about Liberia and about Lincoln University. In fact, it had buried all of its memories about slavery and did relatively little to promote racial equality in its curriculum, in the churches for which it produced ministers, and the larger American society. For its part, the institution across the street, Princeton University, also forgot its connection with colonization, Liberia, and Lincoln University. Sadly, our academic neighbors in Princeton also forgot about their Presbyterian roots and the fact that the untold millions of dollars donated by Harvey S. Firestone Sr. had come from exploitative extraction of resources and labor from Liberia. It is clear that the little Presbyterian town of Princeton has done a lot of forgetting until the last 5 years about matters addressed by this conference. PTA's historical audit on slavery has continued to precipitate major changes. The seminary has created scholarships for students at the master's and doctoral levels. It has established a new chair in the history department devoted to the ongoing study of slavery and the many trajectories of the afterlives of slavery. It has named the second largest theological library in the world after the first African American graduate of any theological school in North America, after Theodore Cedric Wright, who was graduate of the 50th class of 1828, a Presbyterian minister and an ardent abolitionist. It has committed itself ongoing to academic exploration of slavery, race, and colonization in West Africa through conferences like this one and several other initiatives. Also significant is the naming of the Bessie Stockton Center for Black Church Studies and the appointment of its first full-time director, who is here with us today. These responses to the uncovering of gory narratives are neither sufficient nor satisfactory, but they are an earnest beginning of what we hope will be an endeavor that permanent changes the seminary, the churches we serve, American society, and the transatlantic region in the direction of a more faithful realization. We are just beginning this transformative journey, and we are so grateful to be in conversation with all of you in attendance, with our various partners, and by all people who work for a more just, egalitarian, and hopeful future. There are well over 100 schools of higher education in the United States engaged in related research, which is a part of a national awakening with how deeply grounded they are in the slave economy of the 18th and 19th century. They have created a new consortium called Universities Studying Slavery, which our seminary has joined. This conference, which focuses on the transatlantic dimension of the afterlife of slavery, seeks to explore colonization, Christianity, commerce, such as implementation and the local African responses. 19th century Western abolitionists, but also the American Colonization Society, called for the introduction of Christianity and commerce to Africa as a means of ending the notorious transatlantic slave trade. They envisioned the replacement of the colors in human chattel with the Bible and the plow, or legitimate commerce and the blessings of civilization and Christianity, in the words of Thomas Princeton, an early proponent. Essentially, Africans will continue to produce much needed raw materials for industries in the West. But this time, the production of cotton and palm oil, for example, will take place in Africa, not in the Americas. In return, Africans were expected to accept the Western way of life, including Christianity, education, trade, together with marriage and familiar arrangements. The timing of this conference is particularly conspicuous. It comes in the same year that Liberians are commemorating the bicentennial of the return of the free African Americans to what is now Liberia. They disembarked January 7, 1822, and founded the Republic of Liberia a quarter century later. As Liberia celebrates the bicentennial, or has been celebrating the bicentennial of the nation's founding, we are hoping that we will look back in order to look forward to building bridges across the Atlantic with the people of Liberia, other African countries, and the African diaspora. And we certainly look forward to present and future opportunities to work with the universities, schools, churches, and organizations in Liberia. Let me end my brief note with words of gratitude to the hosting institution, particularly President Nelson, for this laudable collaboration, particularly the funding provided by the University of Liberia and Princeton Theological Seminary. The planning committees from Liberia and the United States, as has been enumerated. I will have another occasion during this conference to mention specific names accordingly. So I have just skipped that whole session. But I would like to just use this opportunity to say that this conference has been attended by a global audience. And I would like to, for this reason, just ask all those colleagues who have come from Princeton, please rise. And remain standing. Please rise and remain standing. And all those who have come from Trenton, from other parts of the United States, please rise and remain standing. And all those who have joined us from Europe and other parts of the world outside Liberia, please rise. And I'm quite conscious that there are people rising online. So, yes, so please, thank you for attending this conference. Please sit. So we have put together a total number of 66 presentations, comprising 4 keynote lectures, 9 panel sessions, 2 parallel sessions, 1 in-person and 1 virtual. Please sit back, fasten your seatbelt, relax, and enjoy the stimulating intellectual encounter, exchange, and networking that this conference promises. Thank you.
Let's give him another big round of applause. Such a moving presentation. Certainly, we hope to hear from you and others any more moving stories. Thank you, Dr. Afif. You know, why in your speech, the Princeton players, where you did a lot of forgetting, you know, about what was happening in Liberia. A lot was happening on the other side of the Atlantic. I recall you were here, many of you. We celebrated as a university our 71st anniversary on February 15 this year, and we were here celebrating that Economic History Conference. 3 years ago, the University of Liberia celebrated its centenary commencement convocation before we were University of Liberia College, from in 1862. And 4 years later, we graduated. We had our first commencement in 1866. So 2019 marked 100 years of educating impact on the children. The University of Liberia, formerly Liberia College, is indeed a story of what was happening on the other side of the Atlantic. So the story is compelling. The man now who heads the University of Liberia now, formerly Liberia College, is Reverend Dr. Julius Jonathan Nelson, the president of the University of Liberia. Please give him a big hand of applause at the time. To bring you a special picture.
Honorable Legislator Rennie, our Minister of Information, Cultural Affairs and Tourism, the Chairman of the National Bicentennial Commemoration Committee, Steering Committee, officials of government present, Excellencies, knowing the members of the Diplomatic Corps, heads of international organizations, Reverend Dr. Samuel B. Reed, the President of the Liberian Council of Churches, the Senior Pastor of the Providence Baptist Church, other prelates and clergy, heads of members of religious institutions, presidents, heads of academic institutions around the world, especially Liberia, the University of Liberia family, our administrators, faculty, staff, and students, members of the Fourth Estate, distinguished guests, fellow Liberians, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me at this time, on behalf of the university family, to welcome each and every one of you to this historic Afterlives of Slavery International Conference, which is jointly organized by the University of Liberia and the Princeton Theological Seminary. This conference is historic because it's a part of our bicentennial national celebration in the Republic of Liberia. Let me extend sincere thanks and profound gratitude to the Afterlives of Slavery International Conference Planning Committee for a great job they have done over several months, but especially so in the last few weeks in organizing the conference. Dr. Ali, Professor Gomez, thank you very much. It was not easy, but we crossed the Rubicon, and we are here today. As you are aware, the government of Liberia and the people of Liberia are commemorating the 200th anniversary of the arrival of free black slaves in what is now called Liberia. A number of events are scheduled throughout the year in recognition of our country's bicentennial. As a part of the program marking these events, the University of Liberia, the nation's flagship university, in conjunction with Princeton Theological Seminary, USA, is hosting this event, the Afterlives of Slavery International Conference under the theme, Colonization, Christianity, and Commerce, the Afterlife of Slavery in the Transatlantic World. The conference is geared towards understanding the life of slaves after the transatlantic slave trade. As we host the 3-day international conference at the Ellen Johnson Salim Ministerial Complex in Congo Town, Monrovia, beginning today, October 17th to Wednesday, October 19th, 2022. It is expected, as it is seen today, to bring together the usual faculty, staff, students, along with Liberians of all walks of life, scholars, senior policymakers, government officials, as well as dignitaries and academics from abroad in the sub-region to deliberate on those fascinating topics that befit this occasion. Let me recognize our guests and colleagues from Princeton, Theological Seminary, and others from around the world who are in attendance to make this conference what it ought to be. This hybrid conference also forms a part of the year-long activities of the 2022 National Bicentennial Commemoration, which was officially launched on February 14, 2022, under the theme, The Year of the Return. You to know that the University of Liberia chaired the History Subcommittee under the chairmanship of our distinguished professor, William Ezra Allen. Several presentations are expected to be made during the 3 days conference. Several Liberian and international scholars, historians, clergymen, and clergywomen will make and take the stage to discuss colonization, Christianity, and commerce, including our students that will be sharing their thoughts as to where we are and where we hope to go. We anticipate that the deliberation will be interactive with you as the audience be a major company, because at the end of the day, we will all learn from each other as we share our thoughts here at this conference. I cherish the hope that we all have a wonderful and successful conference here at the Ministerial Complex. Welcome one, welcome all. God bless all of you. Let us celebrate partnership between the University of Liberia and Princeton Theological Seminary. God bless.
Thank you, Mr. President. Please give the President of the University of Liberia a big round of applause. The University of Liberia is indeed an outcome and product of the Afterlives of slavery. As I said in 2019, when we celebrated our 100 commencement publications, we graduated the highest number of students from this university in Liberia, over 3,342 students graduated in 2019. That was a record. From 1866, one student, to 2019, 3,342. Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, so we will continue with the program, remarks. It's time for remarks. And we will skip protocol demands that we make a slight alteration. The chairman of the National Bicentennial Committee will come there on somewhere down. And so we will now call on the president of the Association of Liberian Universities, ALU, Dr. Nelson is the president, but it is our pleasure to now invite for special remarks on this occasion, Dr. Benjamin Lati. He is the president of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion. Let me make it clear. Zion University. Please give Dr. Benjamin Lati the vision of to bring remarks on behalf of all of the presidents of Liberian universities, who some of you are here with us today and will be with us in the next few days to commemorate this great occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me stand on existing protocols which have already been established. I bring you greetings at this very important international conference from the Association of Liberian Universities. As we meet these few days to deliberate on colonization, Christianity, and commerce, the afterlife of Christianity, of slavery in the transatlantic world. As you know, we are still commemorating our bicentennial, and this conference, this international conference, is well placed in the process. We know that after these few days, we have learned a lot from the various presentations. I learned we will be having something like 66 presentations. And he said we need to get our seatbelt ready. We need to get our pen and paper. Because there's so much to be learned. There's so much packed in the next 3 days. We are happy to be part of this great deliberation. And so we welcome all of you on behalf of the Association of Liberian Universities, Dr. Nelson, our president. We say thank you, sir. We know it's not easy to organize what is going on. When we come, it looks simple, but we know what is happening behind the doors. So on behalf of all of us, the Association of Liberian Universities, we say welcome and we say congratulations to the planning. And we look forward to 3 days of interaction. And I know that at the end, we'll be able to tell the story better than we already know that story. Thank you.
At the end, we know how to tell the story, and this conference will help us tell the story better. And then also to be the best. Thank you, Dr. Latin, for those special remarks on behalf of the President of the Association of Liberian University. Okay, the next item of this program should be the dance group performance. Is the dance group performance here?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm taking help with that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to take a temporary pivot away from hearing great and glowing speeches to a dance performance. Please give the dance performance a big hand of applause. As we come up here, and you all need to come up front so that our cameras, we have a lot of cameras here, can capture you. We want you to be in the picture of the outline of this conference. Is it performance from Providence Baptist Church? Yes, it's from Providence Baptist Church. Providence Baptist Church is the first church in this country. It is an outcome of the afterlives of slavery. The pastor is here, Reverend Dr. Samuel Reeves. He's also the president of the Liberia Baptist Theological. Yeah, I'm a Baptist, I can struggle with the United States in mind. Because I always. So please, go ahead, please, ladies and gentlemen, give them a big hand as they come. So we will start with performance. Good morning, you all. My name is Thomas Sidney Palava. I'm from Providence Baptist Church and also a student of the University of the I'll be doing for you this Friday. Mama Nabi. Good morning, Mama Nabi. Good morning, mother of Black African slaves from different parts of the world who found peace as they landed on Broken Island. Good morning, Mama Liberia, who went through a lot of things, yet still she found for herself a suitable name, Liberia, the land of liberty. Good morning, Mama Liberia. Despite of all her suffering and shame, she still brought forth the best of grain, Liberia. Good morning, Mama Liberia. A mother who saw so many suffering she fought for her children and for them. And because of the epidemic attitude, it was passed on from one person to another. We have so many people enslaved today than at any point in history because of the suffering that she saw. Human trafficking, slavery, domestic work in harsh conditions, slavery. Today, with growing population suffering, we have more people enslaved today than at any point in history. After 14 years of misunderstanding, now within the working that she put into place to bring for people to harmony. And with conference and gathering like this, the teachings on slavery and on our roots, where we came from as a people, for fear in us that is incumbent upon us to not enslave all people. Good morning, Mama Liberia. You're over.
Waiting water, waiting water, children, waiting water, waiting water, waiting water, children, waiting water, God waits over the water. We are the sons and the daughters. We gotta stand up and break it down. It's time to cross the river and not people go. We are the new generation of the ones who have come before. It's time to knock the freedom and not people go. Waiting water, waiting water, waiting water. We are a new generation.
President of the African University, and I'll be doing the piece titled "The Liberia I Know." Ask me. Ask me, and I'll begin to express the anger that fills my heart each time I hear the failures of this society. But ask me about the Liberia I know, and I'll boast about it wholeheartedly. Hold on. Let me take you back in time to our beautiful history. Let me fill your ears with the echoes of our forefathers' victories and the melodies of Liberia that would be nothing without Providence. It's a 10-letter word that hails our excellence, a word that describes how it started but not how it ends. I could go on and on just bragging about it. Ask me and I'll tell you how our forefathers rose up from the Holy Land, traveled from the Kalahari and through the Sahel and the Sand. Their feet were scorched by the heat during the day, and at night they were find a place for their heads to lay. But at last, they settled on the land that we call home today. Long after our people were freed from captivity, they set sail on the tide of the Atlantic for a place they can continue to live in peace and unity. Ask me. Ask me, and I'll tell you that I am a descendant of a slave, a descendant of people that were beaten, bruised, and slain, cut off from civilization and left to collect what was left of a favorite race. Ask me. Ask me, and I'll tell you about Providence. Ask me, and I'll tell you about Providence, and I'll tell you the sweet melodies of our great church of Providence. If someone happens to ask me, what does Providence sound like? I'll smile, take a deep breath, and pause, right? Then, like a fire, I'll ignite, and with my smile so bright, I'll say that Providence sounds a lot like Lord Perry, our founding father and visionary. Providence sounds like the worship of the congregation. It's the same worship that fills the air with life and invasion. Ask me. It's been 200 years towards His grace, 200 years towards His freedom, 200 years as a Christian legion, 200 years being frowned on for being a certain race. But I know that the only race that will embrace is across the bridge of love for His name's sake. It's been 201 years. There is no time. Thank you very much. Briefly getting the Ministerial. This is not a story that started once upon a time, but that we were time of passing the person with the future. I don't know about you. We all have been there.
I don't know about you, but I believe that we all are connected than ever. Here is my own piece. If I spend the time with my forefathers, I would say, welcome to my motherland, a place where people uphold their culture and traditions, a place of morals and discipline, a place where people respect who they are and how they live. A time when children greet their elders by reaching down to their feet, a time when the blessing of our parents rested on our shoulders, and spears and arrows were the weapons of our warriors now called soldiers. A time when girls were taught and prepared to the way of a halfway. A time when boys were trained to truth and discipline. A time of moral attitude and lifestyle. Education was not just a thing to people. No, they were taught. Use the people who will invest in the next time to come. That's why I think about past, present, and the future. Comparing Liberia of then to Liberia of now, it harms me. Comparing Africa of then to Africa of now, it harms me. Welcome to this Africa. Welcome to a place where morals are now based on the hard words of a child parent raised by another child parent, and this goes on as our culture and tradition sits in all the kids trying to speak in us. Welcome to a time when greed can off the hearts of our leaders, blind the eyes to the need of the people, but the need of their households and food. Welcome to a time when our little sisters are now our father's addiction. Welcome to a time where our little sisters are now our father's addiction. It haunts me. Welcome to this great love embrace that is so proudly called the new age. Welcome to this Africa. Thank you.
Good, that's it. Wow. Good. Wow. That was good. That was good. Please, give them a big one. What we learned, what we experienced, and what we appreciate. Those of our guests who are visiting our country for the first time. It's a great country, good history, young boys. So we're playing this program, we're going to talk about fighting of the institution. We will take away the ground from the whole of follow our two precautions incidents we have made. So please, thank you very much. We hope that you will come out and give yourself on the tail to some of them. At this stage, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to invite the chairperson, chair Jeremy, who have this singular task of commemorating this 200 years of our history, of our existence as a country. And this task was given to a journalist by training, an advocate, a fighter, who for so many years traded his professional work in the media and made a seamless transition into government. He's currently the Minister of Information, Corporate Affairs and Tourism, Honorable Ledger Reddy, who is also the National Chair of the National Bar Certificate Committee. He will come to bring special remarks on behalf of the Ministerial, the National Bias Committee. You also play a very important role of serving as the official launcher of the Afterlives of Slavery International Conference. The President of the Republic of Liberia and the Visitor of the University of Liberia, George Monrovia, should have been here to play this role. However, that task has been entrusted to President Williams. Order case. Airborne Lieutenant, please give the chairman and minister and launcher the District of Law has come to bring remarks and to launch this program on behalf of the President. We use this word.
Let me look at my time and see whether it's still in the morning. So let me begin by saying good morning to all of you. And to start by recognizing Dr. Princeton, also in the University of Liberia, all the visitors who come from far away with this education, to the academicians who are also to all of you who come, including you who are here, to have such a conference at this time. The previous speakers have spoken of before, how it is important as it relates to our national celebration of our bicentennial that we founded the last 100 years with three cities of the United States. But it also is important because such an event like this will add to the already rich heritage written by Liberia, the free slaves, and also the afterlife of those who endured servitude in the United States. The 66 presentations were put, I'm sure will enrich the already existing body of knowledge with respect to the lives of our brothers and sisters and our forebears, but also to provide new insights that those who will be attending this conference, as well as the confederation that will emerge as a result of the conference, will provide for the younger generation of our country, and some of us, new knowledge in terms of what happened several years ago. It is no gainsaying when we selected the University of Liberia to serve as the subcommittee chair responsible for the historic aspect of our national bicentennial. This is quite a laudable effort on your part. Thank you on behalf of His Excellency the President of the Republic. Thank you, the University of Princeton, the University of Liberia, Dr. Allen, the lead who was seconded to us by Dr. Nelson, to the work and everything. Thank you for this, what I call a monumental effort. The hall isn't full today, but I'm sure there are a lot of others who are watching by social media and all different platforms available, through multimedia platforms. And we want to say this. Liberia has a rich history. The last 2 decades of our country have been a pleasant story to tell. Each nation has its worst. So Liberia perhaps has gone through its worst and is now metamorphosizing. We can learn from the mistakes of the past
to be able to pass a future that is enviable, especially for the young people of our country. I hope this conference will serve as one of such launch pad that will allow for new thinking, new approaches to how we move as a country and how we celebrate ourselves, especially during this bicentennial year. So let me, on behalf of the National Steering Committee that I chair, thank all of you, especially the organizers, President, and the University of Liberia. And to the working committee, when I walked in, Dr. Williams, calling the names of all of those working behind the scenes to ensure that the conference is successful. So I want to thank all of you on behalf of His Excellency for this conference. And to now declare on behalf of His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Liberia, Dr. George Monrovia, the launch of this all-important and historical gathering. God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, Mr. Chairman. Please give the Minister and Chairman a round of applause for launching the conference. The conference now is officially launched, and therefore we are liberated to do anything, right? Good, good. Some of the guests are finding their way here. Let me also announce that those of us who are following live on social media, wherever you are listening to the Afterlives of Slavery International Conference on October 17, 2022 here at the EGS Ministerial Complex. We'd like to thank you all for following up to us live via our various social media platforms. Also, I would like to announce to those who are here in the hall, as well as outside on the ground floor of this amazing facility, as part of this conference, we have vendors who are selling various items, artifacts, paintings, sculptures, etc. Very important historical significance to this particular conference. So we can go down there at some point to patronize our vendors. Some of them are from here, others are from outside Liberia. So please do that as well. Okay, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, so we started, we are making good time of progress. The program has been launched, remarks have been made because of launching. Now, it's another important part of the program because we are about to make a segment. So please, relax, stay tuned, as my Jackie said. More history, more narrative will be unfolded shortly. It's my pleasure now to invite for the first keynote speaker. There are several keynote speakers at this conference, and it's about time for us to hear the first distinguished keynote speaker from Professor David D. Daniels III. He's from the Theological Seminary in the United States of America, and he's going to is an African half of the story. African Christianity, the Black Atlantic, and the egalitarian tradition in the period starting 1600 to 1847. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor David E. Daniels return as he brings his first speaker address. And it will be moderated by Professor. Please give me the answer.
So thank you so much. Just as I would attempt to read the citation, David, would you like to comment? He's my elder brother, and when elder brothers warn you not to read their citation extensively, I've attempted to compress a 15-page resume into one page. So forgive me if I miss essential aspects. So just hold on while I read that. Okay. So Professor David Daniels III is the Henry Winters Lewis Professor of World Christianity at Monrovia Theological Seminary, having joined the faculty in 1987 and was inaugurated Professor of Church History in 2003. Professor Daniels received the Bachelor of Arts from Berlin College in Maine in 1976, majoring in religion and economics. In 1979, he obtained the Master of Divinity from Yale University. During his years at Yale, he was a Benjamin Mays Fellow for the Fund for Theological Education. Professor Daniels earned a PhD in Church History from Union Theological Seminary in New York in 1992. Professor Daniels is the author essays, academic articles, and chapters in edited books on the history of Christianity. He has served as a member of 7 research projects funded by various foundations, including the Leading Endowment, the Lewis Foundation, and Pew Charitable Trust. Professor Daniels has lectured at over 20 universities, colleges, and seminaries in the United States, including Harvard University, Vanderbilt University, Regent University, Wheaton College, Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, and so on. He's also lectured at the Bose Institute in Switzerland, the Spiritan International School of Theology in Enugu, Nigeria, the Sheikh Diop University of Dakar, Senegal, and Emmanuel College of Victoria University at the University of Toronto in Canada. He has presented academic papers at conferences in Nigeria, Senegal, Switzerland, Sweden, Great Britain, Lebanon, South Korea, the Philippines, Malaysia, Canada. Should I go on? Because of time, I'll stop there. Professor Daniels is a member of the American Academy of Religion, the Society for the Study of Black Religion, and the Society for Pentecostal Studies. He has served as the president of the Society for Pentecostal Studies and the co-chair of the Reformed Pentecostal International Dialogue. Professor Daniels is a bishop in the Church of God in Christ. He chairs the National Board of Education for the denomination. He has served as a commissioner for the Faith and Other Commission of the National Council of Churches, presented at the General Assembly of National Council of Churches, and has participated on consultations sponsored by the World Council of Churches. And I think I will just stop there before he gives me enough. So it's my great pleasure and delight, as we say in Nigeria, to invite my Egbon to come and share the gospel.
I want to thank Dr. Amagame and the committee first for the honor to be here. I thank Dr. Allen, the president of this university. It's truly a pleasure to be in Liberia again. I also want to acknowledge the house with all the dignitaries that are here and our guests. I can't help but say that when I was in college, I had decided that when I crossed one of the oceans, the first place I wanted to go to was Africa. And so when I finished seminary at the age of 25, in the African American community, which I still is true in Liberia, people give you money when you graduate. You know, you probably give money when you're in seminary, but they give you money when you graduate. And I had a job that was going to pay a paycheck. So I took all of my earnings, all of my gifts, and I got a ticket and I flew to Abidjan, to Cote d'Ivoire, and then I went up to Burkina Faso, and I went over to Mali. My French then and my French now is not that good. And so at some point when I was in Ouagadougou, I said, I need to go to an English-speaking country before I leave. And so in 1979, I visited Liberia for the first time. And I promise you, it was a delight. I could use my English. I could discover a place that I had been before. There used to be a KFC. There was a Holiday Inn on top of a hill that was here. And I founded a Baptist church and Holy Temple Church of God in Christ, where I'm near the Bay Area. And so it is a delight, I want to say, to be back in Liberia. So bless you all. My presentation today, you can see, is called An African Catholic Story. As Dr. Agave said, one of my areas that focuses on is African Christians in the 16th and 17th century. So I try to push the story back before the 19th century. And I think that if we start in the 19th century, we distort the history, but we also lose, if I'm correct, at least half that history. So I wanted to focus today on the African Catholic story, African Christianity, the Black Atlantic, and the egalitarian tradition, 1600 to 1847. I want to say that my area is world Christianity. And in world Christianity, I'm part of a trajectory that seeks to focus on the exchanges between Christianity within the global south, in particular Africa's impact on Asia, or Africa's impact on South America. But also as a scholar of world Christianity, I focus on the impact of Africa on Europe, on the south to the north. And so I try to change the direction. It's not from the west to the rest, but it's how has Africa been a major factor in Christianity of the Reformation, 16th century. So one of the things I work on is 1534, Martin Luther meets an Ethiopian cleric in Wittenberg named Michael the Deacon. And there's a letter, there's an exchange, and there's some scholars who believe that there's an impact that this Ethiopian had on the development of Lutheranism. So I want to ask those kinds of questions. The second thing I want to say is that I'm also part of a group, though I'm not as prominent as they are, George Fredrickson, Cornel West, Catherine Gerber, who argue that modern racism doesn't begin into the late 1600s. Some run around 1600, early 1700s. So all the things you often hear connected with the 19th century of how Europeans perceive Africans is really happened after 1700. And if you look at the period prior to 1700, you see a different relationship between Africa and Europe, and a different relationship between African Christians, and a different relationship between Europeans and Africans. So I asked this question, I wonder then, that since, at least in the United States, I'm not sure about in Liberia, our knowledge of the historical period of 1600 to 1884 is often told in the West from a Eurocentric perspective. What Europeans did, what Europeans were thinking, what Europeans unfolded. And I'm part of a group that believes that because of modern racism, we almost make Europeans into gods. That whatever they wanted, they got. And so how do you then ask a different question? What happens when we tell the story with African Christians as the key? With African Christians as the key actors. I'll go on. So the term afterlives by Sadia Hartman is the afterlives of slavery. It's this radical calculus, racial calculus, or this alternative or this political arithmetic. She says it this way. Slavery had established a measure of man and a ranking of life and worth that is yet to be undone. Black lives are still in peril and devalued by a racial calculus and a political arithmetic that were entrenched centuries ago. This is the afterlife of slavery. Skewed life chances, limited access to health and education, premature death, incarceration, impoverishment. I too, she says, am the afterlife of slavery. So this racial calculus, she calls it, I want to make it a little more simple and call it a racial mathematics. And in this racial mathematics is the equation of white domination and black subordination. It's placing more worth on whiteness than on blackness. And therefore, this racial mathematics leads us to missing the fact that it is an equation that didn't stop with slavery, but it continued even after slavery. My first question is, did egalitarian trajectories exist in African Christianity that countered colonial Christianity or European Christianity? Did egalitarian trajectories exist in African Christianity that countered colonial Christianity? So I want to propose that an egalitarian tradition, egalitarian trajectory, at least beginning as early as 1600, but probably before, that it is not focused on this equation of white domination and black subordination. It's not focusing on a racial hierarchy of white supremacy or white superiority, but it's concentrated in a theology of racial equality. So where do we look for this? Where do we find this? I think if there is an egalitarian trajectory that starts as early as 1600, and that's within African Christianity, that really does exist, that maybe when we get to 1822, we need to reframe the founding of the Liberian colonies, whether it's Cape Miserato, Maryland, Kentucky in Africa, Mississippi in Africa, Louisiana, or Liberia, those colonies that will become part of the Republic of Liberia, and say that we need to focus on not what the American Colonization Society sought to do, but focus on what African Christians sought to do. So someone like Paul Cuffey's 1811 vision is probably more important, for me at least, for this egalitarian tradition than the African American Colonization Society 1816 vision. So where do we find the Where do we find the information? So I like to say I want to use history to make my argument as opposed to create a narrative. So my next section is called African Christianity as Counter-History, Key Junctures in the Egalitarian Tradition of African Christianity, the 1600s. So those of you who know the history of African Christianity realize that by 1650, there's over 3,040,000 African Christians within North America, or within Europe and within Africa. The majority, of course, are in Africa. 100 or so are in England, maybe 100,000 are in Spain and Portugal. So the vast majority of the 3,040,000 are in Africa. There are, of course, largest movements in Ethiopia, Egypt, but then there's other places that you know so well. Congo, Ndongo, Benin, Wari, Alaba. As I said, my area is world Christianity. It's not missiology. So missiologists are concerned about the fact that who was Christian within Benin, or who was Christian in Wari, or who was Christian in Malaba. I don't really care. Because it's the fact that Christianity was there that matters. Even if Christianity was restricted to the royal family, restricted to the royal court, Christianity existed there for over 100 years. That, to me, is what is important. But not only then are there African kingdoms and African empires in the 1600s, but as one of the scholars of political science, John Bodin, he argues even before 1600 that the Ethiopian government was an exemplar for him of one of the forms of government within political science. And in the 1600s, you realize that Sweden and some other countries are looking for alliances with Ethiopia, because Ethiopia is a Christian country that they see themselves as being peers with. And then, those of you who know the Royal Society of London for the Improvement of Natural Knowledge, which is the British sort of Academy of Sciences, even though there were members outside of Britain who were part of that academy, that as late as 1690, they were arguing against those who wanted to say there were various creations. They argued within their scholastic discussions that there was only one humanity, a common humanity, all from one origin. And they debated that what was the difference in color? And they argued that the difference in color did not impact one's mental capacity. So all of the things that you hear in the 19th century, Africans have souls, can Africans think, can Africans be moral, were not what was part of the scientific societies in the 1600s, nor part of the scholarly discussions in the 1600s. Those were ideas that were on the fringe, and they go, of course, from the fringe to the center, get normalized, and become the pseudoscience of the 19th century. So let's take the story back to the 1600s. One of the amazing things to me is the 1600s have confraternities or lay societies that are founded and led by Africans. They're chartered by the Portuguese government, the Brazilian government, the government in Angola. And these confraternities, these lay societies, sometimes have chapters on 3 different continents. And these lay societies are dedicated to the Virgin Mary because they're Catholic, or they're dedicated to some other saint, Saint Ephigenia. And therefore, these lay societies have this international transatlantic network in the 1600s. According to Jose Lina Nepate, who's written this amazing book about how these lay societies mount in the 1600s, the first abolition effort, first abolition campaign. What he describes is that they began to make petitions both to the Portuguese government, the Spanish government, and to the Vatican about how slavery is immoral and slavery is illegal. In 1680s, Lourenço da Silva Mendonça, he ends up presenting a case to the Vatican beginning in 1682. In a sense, according to Napate, he brings it to a court case in the Vatican so that slavery could be seen as being against the Catholic faith, against the laws of nature, and against the understanding of what it means to be human. To make the story short, Lourenço da Silva Mendonça is a Congolese prince who, through the civil wars and Portuguese instigation within the Congo or Angola, ends up being captured, sent to Brazil, enslaved in Brazil, he and other people who were part of the royalty. There's uproar that royalty are enslaved within Brazil. They're set free, Some go back to Brazil in the 1600s, go back to Angola in the 1600s, and he and a group go to Portugal. He gets trained to be a lawyer, and so in 1682, we find him presenting this case. Many scholars have focused on the case. Richard Gray focused on it in a major way, but Richard Gray thought it was merely a petition. But even if it has been a mere petition, it's the fact that it's challenging slavery and the slave trade. But the Nafafe goes on and says that within two appearances, one in 1682 and I believe the other in 1684, that he ends up convincing the Vatican that slavery is wrong, slavery is immoral, slavery is illegal. He wins the case. He's not winning the case on his own. He's being brought to the Vatican because of these confraternities and these lay societies. And so therefore, the Vatican under Pope Innocent XI ends up then saying slavery is condemned, forbids people to be involved in slavery, those who are enslaved, there needs to be reparations. The issue is that while the pronouncement was made, the enforcement wasn't. But as a historian, the fact that they were able to mount the campaign is what's important. Not merely the fact that it wasn't enforced. And the fact that they won the campaign and convinced the Vatican is important, even if it didn't get enforced by the different governments. So therefore, the 1600s then had this egalitarian notion that Christians of African descent need to be treated as any other Christian. And the Roman Catholic Church honors that and respects that. On the Protestant story, one can look at the Synod of Dort. And there, before they get to the theological section in 1618, they also have a discussion about what kinds of slavery is legal and what kind is illegal. And even though in 1618 they don't condemn it outright, they condemn kidnapping and other things in that area, because they also have this notion that there needs to be some understanding of equality. And then lastly, I want to say in the 1600s, some of you might know, and I'm not sure where it is, I know it's south of where we are now, at the Sesto River, that there was a king, Kajava, and King Kajava meets some Protestants. And so he wants to send, or he plans to send his son, Prince Desire Jacob. So in 1610, he sends his son to England to be catechized as a Protestant. Desire gets catechized, gets baptized in the Church of England, Christmas Day of 1611, and he returns back to, again, what becomes Liberia. And if my count is correct, he's the first Protestant person of Liberian descent who is from Liberia. And so Miranda Kaufman in Black Tudors talks about this story. So we have then this notion of equality, that the Liberian king can send his son to England, his son can go to England, get baptized, and come back. We have Lorenzo da Silva Dominica being able to protest against slave trade, convince the Vatican, and win. African Christianity as counter history, key junctures in the egalitarian tradition of 1700s. John Thornton, Linda Hayward, and another small group of people believe that there is a Congolese Christian diaspora in the 1700s. This Congolese Christian diaspora is in Brazil, the Caribbean, British North America, and Spanish Florida. If we are correct that there is this Congolese Christian diaspora that is present at least up to the 1750s, maybe 1770s, they could be the missing link in this egalitarian trajectory that I'm describing starts in the 1600s and not earlier. We see the Stono Rebellion, which is a Congolese Catholic event, according to John Thornton and others. They are in the Protestant South Carolina part of the United States during the British colonial period, and they rebel, number one, against enslavement, but number two, they rebel against being forced into the Protestant church, if you want to be Christian, and not to be able to practice Catholicism. And so some of them get caught and are executed, but others of them succeed and end up going to Spanish Florida. And in Spanish Florida, they created a community called Fort Mose or Fort Moses, which becomes the first self-governing African community within North America. This egalitarian tradition can also be seen within these emancipation petitions of early United States. In Massachusetts in 1788, in Connecticut in 1788, in South Carolina in 1791, and in Pennsylvania in 1799. These petitions were given either to state legislatures asking for slavery to be condemned and those enslaved to be freed, and then the one from Pennsylvania was sent to the U.S. Congress. Again, this notion that there is this egalitarian sense that there's a place for spiritual liberty, but also political and economic liberty. Then, and as Lamansane shows us so well, that in Freetown, which becomes Sierra Leone, that African Americans who were in low country South Carolina, other parts of American South, immigrated to Nova Scotia, and in 1782, they go to what becomes Sierra Leone. They join London's Black Corps. There's also Jamaican Maroons who are sent there. All of it before 1800. And then the question that I have is a key exemplar of this notion. But in the successful campaign to elect two people of African descent to the French Parliament in 1793, informed by the egalitarian tradition. And of course, they do. They're elected, they become full members of the French Parliament during the time of the French Revolution. So the 1600s, we see an egalitarian tradition at play, these lay societies. We see people like King Kabada sending his son to London. We see in the 1700s these petitions, but we also see the French Parliament, the place of one of the Enlightenment, having two people of African descent serving in the Parliament as an example. African Christianity is counter-history. Key junctures in the egalitarian traditions of Christianity, 1800s. The Haitian Revolution would probably be a key moment that we're looking at. Going for the political equality of people of African descent. We already saw that Fort Moses, or Fort Mose, is a place where we have independence, but now we have a whole independent country. And then the setting for our conference today, the Black immigrants to Africa. African Americans coming to Liberia, but also Afro-Caribbeans coming to Lagos Colony, as well as Liberia and other places, and in Sierra Leone. And then even the Afro-Brazilians who go between Brazil and Lagos Colony, but they also go to Lome, Vida, and other parts, Accra even, that's there. So we have these Black immigrants with their focus African Christianity as an alternative to colonial Christianity, recurring theological themes within the egalitarian trajectory of African Christianity. There is this common humanity. There is this notion that we already saw the Royal Society in London affirming. But even though pseudoscience supplants it with notions of polygenesis, the African Christian common sense of humanity continues. Of one blood, God has made all nations. But there's also the spiritual equality. I call it a baptismal egalitarianism. In this baptismal egalitarianism, we have the fact that not only are we all equal in God's eyes, but at the discussions that we saw in the 1600s, that there needs to be a link between baptism and manumission. You cannot enslave another Christian. And so once an African becomes a Christian, then within a Christian community, it is now immoral and illegal, as was ruled during the Vatican for Pope Innocent XI. It is illegal to hold them. Now again, that's theologically held as being key to this egalitarian tradition, but it's not always in practice. This racial equality, that all races are equal, and not only is there racial equality, but there's social equality. All races need to be treated equally. And then there's political equality, the place for self-determination. So now, my concluding question. Do egalitarian trajectories of African Christianity between 1600s and 1800s actually exist? Is there enough material to say that you can go from someone like the confraternities in the 1600s to the Stoner Rebellion and to the two representatives of the French Parliament in the 1700s, to the Haitian Revolution and the founding of Liberia in the 19th century? Can we see that as part of an egalitarian tradition that shows another side of Christianity? Do they potentially explain then the involvement of Christians of African descent in the founding of Liberia as a colony in 1822 and a republic in 1847? As I said in the beginning, I clearly understand why whites were supporting colonization. But do we spend enough time studying why the Africans supported coming back to Africa? And is it this notion that they wanted to vindicate the race, as some of the spokespersons said during the 1830s and 1840s, to vindicate the race by proving that Africans had the capacity to govern themselves in Liberia and then also within Sierra Leone and Haiti? Third question. Does an egalitarian trajectory of African Christians in the Black Atlantic offer a potential narrative about Christianity in Africa that parallels and differs from the story of European Christians and imperialists, marked by racial hierarchies of white superiority of this era? Are there more than one kind of Christianity? Is there this African Christianity that Lorenzo da Silva Mendoza presented before the Vatican? Is there another kind of Christianity? And the petitions that were made to the state legislatures of Massachusetts, Connecticut. Is there another kind of Christianity that is not built on a mathematical equation of white superiority and African subordination? But is it one that's based on social equality, economic equality, political equality, and based on spiritual equality? So at this conference, we're focusing on the afterlives of slavery. So is an alternative African Christianity a resource to undo the afterlife of slavery? If this egalitarian tradition does exist, then they identify obstacles to racial and political equality. Again, people like Lorenzo da Silva Mendonça identifies how Africans are being forced into inhumane situations. There's an abolitionist by the name of Nancy Prince who identifies why, after the emancipation of Africans in Jamaica, they were not able to thrive because they were exploited by their employers. They were forced to buy goods at a high extra price. They were denied education in the fullest extent. And so she identified obstacles to why Africans in Jamaica could not emerge towards racial and political equality. This egalitarian trajectories expose and offer Christian strategies against white domination and black subordination. One is incidents like the Stoner Rebellion, but others are incidences where self-run communities, sometimes called maroon communities, are places where people of African descent can be able to not only vindicate the race, but also be able to engage in self-determination. And then three, egalitarian traditions expose and offer Christian alternatives to white domination and black subordination. There is more than one kind of Christianity within this time period. Within church history classes in the United States, we learn about the Anabaptist tradition, the Reformed tradition, the Lutheran tradition, the Anglican tradition, the Catholic tradition, various Orthodox traditions. And so we learn that there's various streams within Christianity. However, we often only hear, and when we're talking about Christianity in Africa, one kind of Christianity. And so I'm suggesting, I'm advocating for us expanding the notions of Christianity, including the Christianity of Africans, who might practice Christianity that's not identical to the Christianity of missionaries from Europe, nor of the colonial structure. And that Christianity might give us insight in how to undo the afterlife of slavery. Future question that I did not have a chance to pursue. In what ways did African Christians in the Black Atlantic and their egalitarian tradition, if there is one, promote Christianity, civilization, and commerce in Africa differently than Europeans during this era? trade shapes Christianity in Africa going back to the 1490s. Clearly, Congo was interested in trade in addition to faith. Clearly, Benin and Mori and Alada was interested in trade in addition to faith. We also see within the 19th century, Brazilian merchants are taking goods that are made in Brazil, selling them within Lagos Colony, and then taking goods from Lagos Colony and bringing them back to Brazil, all in the 1830s. There's Cape Verdeans that are going between Cape Verde and New England, parts of Massachusetts within the United States. There's a number of African Christians who are engaged in trade. I didn't have enough time to see whether they were engaged in exploitative practices or whether they were engaged in practice of equality. That's the topic that can be studied. So not only are there Europeans engaged in commerce, that Africans engaged in commerce, trading among themselves, without Europeans being the middle person. So the question, in what ways did African Christians in the Black Atlantic and their egalitarian tradition promote Christianity, civilization, and commerce in Africa differently than African Christians during this period? So let me conclude by saying, I hope that you get the sense that at least I think we need to find a different way of telling the story. Somehow, the jure, the French from Sestos River, needs to be part of the story of the first Protestants in Africa that are baptized in England, but return back to Africa and possibly take over from their fathers. What happens to the church in the Sestos River area? I'm not sure. Maybe somebody in this room knows. But it's the other part of the story that needs to be told. We also need to tell the other part of the story that it is not in the 19th century or the late 18th century that the abolitionist campaign begins. It actually begins with African Christians who are Catholic or in lay societies and a petition to the Vatican. And retelling the story then, Africans are the key actors and they're in the forefront, and Europeans are put in the right position and right place. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Daniels, for whetting our appetite, and indeed he had much more to say, but in view of our time, he decided to cut back on that. And apologies for the technical glitch. I hope that we managed to catch up with some of the slides. Yes, I know that lunchtime is approaching, so we would like to take a few questions. Make sure that we don't give another lecture,
get a flare in the pan
because that reduces the time for eating. So we would like to take perhaps one round of questions. There's a mic here. Could we pass this mic? Yes, so if you'd like to ask a question or a comment, pass a comment, please indicate and I will follow you. Speak now or forever be quiet. Okay, we have one hand.
Brilliant gathering. Well, my question is Islam have been included in this discussion?
The answer is yes. One is speaking of the role of religion. Islam good, or should we think good? The number of religions. There is a relationship. There's one beautiful story of a Muslim leader within the Monrovia area. He has Jews who are from Europe, as well as African Jews, and Christians who are from Europe, as well as African Christians. And he refuses to let the politics of Europe, meaning discrimination against Jews, occur in his kingdom. He says, you do that in Europe, but you don't do it here. So there's other parts of the story that could be told. The issue is that my focus is world Christianity. We would need an Islamic scholar.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take maybe 2, 3 questions and then we'll have a conversation. So you don't need to respond immediately. Please.
Thank you very much. Some aspects of really an answer. And I think in most religious traditions, there are streams of interpretation of the matter of slavery. And to express the same opinion, Christian streams of interpretation. I take a good case that there have been egalitarian streams of interpretation of slavery. The same would apply to many other religious texts. If you had to recommend very research texts, view of the argument made in the Islamic tradition of interpretation in speech, then during the prophetic phase of Arabia, Medina, Prophet Muhammad often tried to what we would call diminish the slavery practice, and he didn't succeed. Because you could see beyond Arabia practice. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I was in the Liberian and reading so many of them became wondering why is Nigeria existing or sitting here with a lot of African Americans in this country helping to build. And I also heard you talking about you were probably asking whether we have different types of Christianity in Africa or in the US. I'm somebody who likes to contextualize. I would say that maybe we have different types. For the Africans, we are trying, or Nigerians, have come to embrace the Christian faith. We've been trying to contextualize and give African culture. Because when the missionaries came, the American culture that we were discouraged of even wearing our African attires and living we're trying to live according to the American standard. And today Liberians are like people suffering from confusion because as a lot of children, even the youth and students that we have are only aspiring to be something else other than being authentic Liberians, people who are made of both indigenous and American Liberians that can the experiences and make it, people. And I think that the Civil War, the Civil War actually happened happy because of the American Colonization Society sending our brothers and sisters without following them to also make Liberia viable as a country that I don't know if you have something to say about that, but I just thought I can say that.
Yeah, thank you so much. David, could you take two more, or is already the answer? Okay, let's take two more. One and the last. Please be brief, and if it's a question, go straight to your question. Can we have the mic? Oh, all right. So we have to increase the number. Okay, just your question or comment, please. Brief.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Thanks so much for this very insightful, speech. The question is this: you talked so much on African Christianity, European Christianity, and here we talked about afterlives of slavery. I was expecting you to want to shed more light on how African Christianity in the Black Atlantic and European Christianity influence African traditional religion.
Thank you. David, would you like to respond to those three, and then we'll take the two last ones?
So regarding the books, again, I think that the most interesting is now dealing with African perspectives on slave trade in the 17th century, with being done by the There's another text by Toby Green. There's another text by Toby Green that deals with the Congo. Because one of the things is that we have to figure out what's the story that we tell. So the prophet wants to say that contemporaries in the 1600s said that there was very little slavery going on within Africa at the time. That Europeans basically introduced slavery and accelerated. So there's different ways to interpret the story. Concerning contextualization, I just want to add different people to the story. So I want to not only say it's contextualization going on where there are people in Liberia who are adopting Western dress, but a little bit later, we have people labeled commonly who are deciding that they're going to wear African. They're going to take on African, even though they had English. So they're going to a direction that might go in other places. And I think that's what makes for the exciting debate. That's not unidirectional, it's multi-directional. And how do we look at that and put them in conversation with one another? On the African traditional religion, I also think that's a great question. And unfortunately, in this time period, and maybe Dr. Alexander, I'm not sure who speaks positively in the 19th century African religion. Edward Blythe speaks positively as a Christian of Islam, and thinks Islam has a lot to offer. But I'm not sure who spoke positively of African religion. So within the 19th century, 18th century, 17th century, African religion is seen as something to overcome. So that's why I didn't bring it up, because it doesn't come up in the authors that I was studying. Not secondary authors, but primary people who live in those countries.
Thank you for those brief but very prudent responses. Let's take the last two, and one, and then the last.
Thank you, the president starting this weekend. Thanks for that wonderful discussion. So that it will give participants more information on afterlives of slavery. My question goes how can African countries stop real colonialism? Because you see some of the African countries, after the colonization, we still depend on some of these big countries like US, UK, and the likes. How can the African countries stop depending them in terms of economy, in terms of other pieces of economy? I don't do that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have the last question here.
Yes, thank you very much for your insightful presentation. You speaking about African Christianity. Is that not an attempt to address Christianity in Africa and foreign groups? Because you cannot look at Christianity between 1600 and 1847 and say it's been owned by Africans. So for me, the consciousness of the right is talking about Christianity and another African Christianity. Especially when you look at it from the perspective of the founding fathers, African founding fathers of Christianity. The Christianity that was practiced on this, how was it different from what Augustine, Bishop of Monrovia, was trying to Christianize his areas of mission? So, the background of this is it violent, respecting of African Christianity rather than Christianity.
Thank you. So, yes, the last question. Okay, so the question was, will it not be more appropriate to talk about Christianity in Africa instead of African Christianity during that time period?
So, on the earlier question about decolonizing, so there needs to be a decolonizing. Decolonization is a hot topic these days, and there's multi-layers to decolonizing. The key thing for me is decolonize that leads towards the common good. So decolonize for the sake of culture or for the sake of psychological elements, I applaud. But decolonization actually leads to flourishing. That to me is more exciting. And how that is done, clearly there needs to be transparency, anti-corruption, there needs to be moves where people are in contact with their culture. But culture is not static. There's development within culture. One theologian told me that in the 1960s, his elders were looking to figure out how to talk about African theology in relation to the village. He said that his generation only goes to the village for vacation. They're in the major cities of Africa. And so how does the theology then address Africa, address the major cities, and not address the village? I think that to me is part of the decolonization. On the question about Christianity in Africa versus African Christianity, I think I want to call that Christianity because these are Africans who are promoting this form of Christianity, whether they are those from the Congo or Angola, those Afro-Brazilians, whether they're Afro-Nova Scotians, they are the ones that are the definers, the leaders, the organizers of the Christianity. So it's not really something imposed for Christianity that is plopped on Africa, but it's something that is constructed by these African agents who come from different parts of the Black community.
Thank you, Professor Daniel. And I think you see it's evoking new questions and all that. But this is just the start of the beginning. So I encourage you. I know there are more questions. I think the best place to continue with this question is over lunch.
Richard.
Yeah, but before we do that, I would just ask you to join me in saying thank you to Professor Daniel for this moment. So, and because you are so kind and patient, Dr. Allen will confirm and decided to give you a special present by adding 15 minutes to the long time. So, could you tell us what it was? So we're going to break for lunch, and after lunch there will be 2 parallel sessions. I guess one will be in this room, and then the second will be here.
Okay, please let's give our moderator a big hand of applause for moderating this section. This is certainly going to be more for the modus operandi of rest of the conference. The most thank you for all the questions, and as you said, we certainly explore the discussions during lunch. The lunch is served at this stage. There are two certain areas, just like how the breakfast was served. The typical applies to the lunch. So we have right here on this floor, we call it the afternoon sun. And for our students, they can move down to the public and quite easier than the rest of us. So we only go down there, there's a bigger hall, a big space, and without more food that we have here. So the crowd is there. And I mean, again, you can see all the food.
Maybe they came out was it?
So much is and we'll be back here to continue the second part of the session. We'll give you some notification so just in case when you come. At this stage, we're joining now for this session. Let's give all of our presenters, everybody, for a big hand of applause.
Communication. You know?